In today's video, we're going to see if you can flip a broken MacBook for profit without actually fixing it. This is a 2016 Retina MacBook, and you're probably wondering two things. Number one, what's broken about it? It looks to be working fine. And two, why is there a flash drive connected to it? These Retina MacBooks actually have a very high rate of SSD failure, where the internal SSD just doesn't work anymore. Wait a minute, isn't the SSD soldered to the logic board? Yes. Yes, it is. So basically, what we have here is a fully functional MacBook that can't recognize its own SSD. So obviously the first priority here is, can we find a fix? Can we make the MacBook recognize its own SSD? And the answer is no, we can't. To give you an idea of just how unfixable MacBooks with a dead internal SSD are, I actually emailed Rossmann Repair Group to see what they would quote me to repair this machine. Would you like to take a guess at how much they quoted me? It's a trick question. They wouldn't fix it at all. There's no fix, and even if there was, it's not worth doing because the CPUs fail as well. Tim! Get your act together, Tim. What's going on? So if we can't repair the board, can we replace the board? Well, this MacBook cost about $300, and if you wanted to buy a logic board to swap into it, it would cost about $300 to $350. So after we did that, we'd be at about $650 for this computer, and that's pretty much the going rate for a working base model 2016 Retina MacBook in decent condition. So we wouldn't be able to make any money, and it would also be a colossal waste of time. So this is a practically worthless computer then. It's not worth the time, money, or effort to repair this computer, so it's not worth it at all. But here's the thing. MacBooks have very expensive parts. The displays, even a used working display, would be about $275, $300 on eBay, and I only paid $300 for the entire computer. So what if instead of fixing it, we were actually to take it apart? There are four main components that go into these MacBooks: the display assembly, the top case assembly, the bottom case assembly, which in this case includes the battery as well, and the logic board. If we were to take all of those apart and sell them individually, granted the logic board is faulty, so it probably wouldn't be worth very much, but in total, that's probably more than $300 worth of parts once we sell them. So that's what we're gonna do. But before we take the computer apart, it's important to take some photos that'll help enhance the listing. So if you wanna follow along at home, what I would recommend doing is taking a picture of the display to prove that it's working, take a picture of the About This Mac window, because that way when you're selling the logic board, you can say, hey, it boots, here are the specs, it's all working, except for the SSD, obviously. We're gonna put that in the listing. And then, of course, you want to take a picture of the keyboard with the backlight working so that that is proven to be functional. And you should probably also take a picture of the battery cycle and condition, because if someone's going to be buying this lower case to replace like a dead battery in their Retina MacBook, you want to be able to show that yours is working. So once all of that stuff is done, let's go ahead and take apart the computer. Now the nice thing about these 12-inch MacBooks is, while they're certainly not upgradable in any way, they are very, very easy to take apart and put back together. If you're replacing one of the major components, these things are absurdly easy to work on, which was very handy when it came time to deconstruct my MacBook. I separated all the major components and boiled it down to the main four: the display assembly, the top case assembly, the lower case and battery assembly, and the problematic logic board. Upon removing these, it was time to create my eBay listings. Now what's interesting here is while the MacBook itself was broken, once we break it down into these 4 parts, everything except the logic board was working and in great condition. The display was super nice with no damage or delamination, the battery only had like 200 cycles and was at 97% capacity, and the keyboard didn't have any sticky keys. For a butterfly keyboard, that's saying something. So creating the listings was a pretty simple process. I just went on eBay, looked at the going price for the parts, and then made my listings. The logic board was a little bit more tricky because obviously it's never going to fully work again. Well, with the SSD and the CPU issues, those 12-inch MacBooks have a lot of problems with the logic boards. So it's never going to be a fully working board. However, there are still usable chips, ICs, the RAM modules, stuff like that that people will salvage from those boards and use on other boards that are broken to repair them. So there is still some value associated with even a less than fully functional logic board. So now that I've sold everything, let's run through the totals and see if I made any money. Now one thing important to note is it does take longer to sell individual parts than it does to sell an actual MacBook. So this took a couple of weeks for me to be able to sell everything, and to speed it up, I accepted offers on most of the listings, so they sold for under the going price in some cases. Case in point, the display. I sold this for $239, which was about $20-30 bucks under what it was going for, but it was a pretty quick sale. The top case sold for $89. The bottom case with the battery sold for $45. Side note, that's actually a pretty decent price. I was surprised that the bottom cases weren't more expensive considering, you know, if your battery dies on your 12-inch MacBook, that's how you could replace it. So 45 bucks for a new battery is not a bad deal at all. And then finally, the logic board was a little bit tricky. I saw people selling them for about $200, $150 with similar issues, and that seemed a little bit high to me, so I just accepted an offer for 99 bucks and figured this person wants it, go for it. So once we add all of that up, we're at $472. Now we're gonna subtract 10% in eBay fees, and we're also going to subtract $24.56, which is what I paid in shipping. All of them were sold with free shipping. So that gives us a total of $400.24. Now I paid $299 with free shipping for the assembled MacBook, so that's a net profit of $101.24. So a $100 profit for essentially doing nothing. There were no repairs. All I did was disassemble the MacBook and sell each of the parts individually. So sure, it's a little bit more work than if I were to just sell a single MacBook, but given that it would have been prohibitively expensive to repair and get a fully working MacBook out of this, this was actually a pretty good way to make a quick buck without doing a whole lot of work. Now, if you're looking to replicate this experiment at home, I would say definitely keep your eye out for something with a fully working display. That's where the big bucks come from. Like $240 was how much my display sold for. That was most of the cost of the MacBook to begin with. Now, this experiment also brings up another scenario that could be very interesting. So let's say, for example, I have a 12-inch MacBook and I've accidentally destroyed the display. It's shattered. I'm gonna have to replace it. Rather than going on eBay and finding a display for $260 or so, which is very expensive, if I were to have bought this $299 for parts MacBook, pulled the display off of it, and then sold the other parts, they would have sold for $209 after selling fees, which means that I would have only spent $90 on the display. So it's a great way to get yourself a cheap display. And this could work for other components. Let's say I buy a machine that's in really crap condition. The display is broken, the battery's dead, but it's got a working logic board. And then I've got another machine like mine with a bad logic board, but everything else works fine. You can essentially combine these two broken machines and end up with a fully working one, and then sell whatever parts you have left to bring the cost down. It's a very interesting way to look at this rather than fixing on a part-by-part basis. Once you start combining MacBooks or selling other parts, it's an interesting way to get yourself a pretty good deal. So that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know down in the comments below if you think this was a worthy use of time. It only took about 45 minutes for the disassembly and maybe another 45 to get all the listings up. So I think it was actually a pretty productive use of an hour and a half. As usual, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Please consider following me on Twitter @LukeMiani and check out my subreddit, which is linked in the description below. And with that, I'll see you all in the next video.